Hi there, it's Liane, and this week we're going to be carrying on making the slipper boots. I hope you enjoy the project. The next stage is, once the main piece of the boot has been trimmed, I'm going to turn it inside out, or the right way out. And I'm just going to spend a bit of time, see how this is all tucked in. I'm just going to finger press the edges of the seam. Can't really take an iron to this unless you're very careful, because fleece is very difficult to work with an iron. A little gap there, caught it. Yeah, just encouraging that to sit nicely when it's pressed down. So once the boot has been pulled back through the main piece of the fabric, the next thing I'm going to do is just find that gap, that 6 centimetre gap that we left in the lining, and I'm going to put my hand into the gap, get hold of the tip of the toe, and I'm going to pull it through so that what we can see is like the bottom part of the foot. We want to see the reverse, like the inside of it. And then once I've got that out like that, I'm going to take the base panel for the lining, put it right sides together, and just check it's slightly wider at the toe, so that's the toe. Line up any notches if you have notches on the base panel. And I'm going to sew this. I think this will be easiest to sew from like the top, because that way I can keep my seams nice and flat. So I'm going to put the clips with the flat side on the flat part of the foot, the base panel. Okay, I'm just going to work my way around and clip these. Again, making sure when I come to the side seam that it is nice and flat. Okay, so now I'm ready, that's all clipped, and I am ready to sew through, just extra on there, ready to sew around the edge and attach this to the foot, the base panel to the foot of the lining. So again, I'm going to start on a straight edge because that's easier, and then come back around. Okay, so slipper should now look like this. We've got the main bit and then this foot panel attached. So I'm just going to trim these threads and then pull it through, back through the boot. Okay, so at this point, it'd be an idea to trim the seam allowance just to make sure that it's not really bulky when it's lining up with the main fabric, because it's going to be sitting right next to that. So again, about halfway along, halfway of the width. Because the curve's going to sit flat, we don't need to notch it, but we do just want to remove a bit of that bulk. Okay, so I'm now going to just push this back through. It's quite bulky, so just a bit at a time, pull it through until it's freed up. Okay, and that's the lining boot inside out again, the right way out again now. So same as we did with the main body of the slipper, just finger crease a little bit just to flatten out that seam, and then it should look like this. So when the lining has been pulled back out, we've still got that little gap to close up here. Because it's in the lining, it's not really going to be seen. You could just fold this over and pin it or just clip it so that it lines up parallel with the rest of the seam, and then just do a line of machine stitching here. So I'll show you that style. It will be quite visible. I'm using a quite dark thread so you'll be able to see the stitching. I'm going to stitch a little bit closer to the edge. It doesn't need to be the usual seam allowance. Okay, so that's what it would look like, and if you were using thread that was the same colour, it would pretty much disappear. And then that can be tucked back into the boot. And the gap's closed. So if you'd like to finish the slippers by hand, where we've got this gap in the lining, you could either do a slip stitch, or I'm going to show you an invisible ladder stitch. So I'm going to just clip this together, and I'm doing that just to kind of finger crease and get the edges to just sit in line with the seam. So I just clip them and just press and get it to just set so it's a nice straight seam. Okay, I'll leave that for a minute, and I'm going to thread up with some just machine cotton thread. I'm using a contrasting colour so you can see clearly. Again, an arm's length is a good amount to work with. If it's a lot longer, the thread seems to get tangled. If it's shorter, we end up having to change the thread quite a lot. So single thread, and just going to do a couple of knots at the end of the thread, one on top of the other. Okay, so take those clips away, and I'm going to start just in the very edge of the seam. I'm going to go behind the seam allowance to hide the knot. And then I'm basically going to go straight across and just catch a few stitches and then head down and across to be directly underneath. This will be a little bit long actually, a bit higher, to be directly underneath there and just to walk out. So it's straight across like the rungs of a ladder and there's a diagonal stitch hidden. So again, I'm going to go straight across and just catching a couple of stitches right on the seam allowance as where the fabric's going to fold, and the fold will hopefully hide my stitching, and I'm going down diagonally to underneath and catching a few stitches. Leaving it quite loose at the moment. Place it straight across again. I'll keep working my way down like this. As I start to pull that tight, you can see that the stitches are starting to disappear and it just blends in with the rest of the seam and starts to look invisible. So just a little bit of a gap to close up. And then I'm going to tie a knot. By just stitching into the seam, a couple of stitches into the seam and looping around the back of the stitch that I know is there. I'm going to push back into the seam and I'm going to come out a little distance away. Take my scissors, I'm going to pull the thread quite tight and then cut very close to the fabric so the end of the thread will disappear. Okay, and then the stitching has been hidden and just blends in invisibly, and now we're ready to put the lining inside out and back into the foot and make arm. And I'm going to push this main foot into the main body, push the lining into the main body. Okay, just taking your time to just flatten it out and making sure everything's lined up. Okay, and that's so the slipper can sit like this or it can be folded. So this is the finished slipper boot, and you could wear it with the leg fully extended. You've also got the option to roll the slipper boot down. If you've done the understitching, you might want to do a little second roll just to hide any visible stitching, and it can become more like an ankle boot. So I hope you've enjoyed the project and thank you for participating. Bye.